And we're back. I'm Professor Scott Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Well, Scott, it's a great day to listen to a podcast here in Minnesota. It's a little rainy outside all day. Have you ever asked a question in a customer interview and gotten an answer that made it harder to sell your product or service? Perhaps this happened because you hadn't prepared questions that lead the customer to understand the unique value that you're bringing to them. Today, Scott and I will explore advantage questions and much more on episode 416 of the Get in the Door podcast.
So before we get into the advantage questions, we're going to go over our book club. This is the last chapter from the book, The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz. And the title is How to Think Like a Leader. I've read this book a few summers ago, and I was going through the notes, and I was looking through my book, Taking Off into the Wind, and I quoted his book in my book. And I thought, wow, it's kind of the circle of life. It's coming back.
That's not stealing, right? As long as you quote it.
I quoted him. I gave him reference to it. So there was a little bit of overlap on it, but this book went by fast. The titles were really concentrated. The topics were really relevant, I think, to everyday life. I think everybody could pull something away and use it that same day that they read in the book.
Well, speaking of relevance, when I read this chapter, I thought, so we're talking to a bunch of professional salespeople out there. Is leadership really important to them? I mean, are they planning on becoming a sales manager, or how does leadership function for them? What does leadership mean if I don't plan on being a positional leader of some kind?
Well, I think any salesperson is in a position of leading because they're leading somebody through a change. And I heard Jill Conrad say one time, sales is leadership. And I've struggled with that. And now I'm really finally able to digest it going, she's right. When you're working with a prospect on a change, you're leading them through an area that they're unfamiliar with and perhaps even uncomfortable with to get to a better outcome, a better result, and a better spot. So you're leading them. So you do have to take charge. You do have to ask questions to find out what's important. You need to validate them along the way. You need to make sure that whatever you're prescribing as a solution is still relevant, even though things may change in the process. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't think we have to think of ourselves as necessarily a positional leader like a sales manager or a team manager or team leader, but we are leading people. We're influencing people. And I think I've mentioned this before. John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, and obviously sales is influence as well. So that's where those three all tend to merge together. As you said, sales is leadership.
And a little sidebar on John Maxwell, he's got a great book, Thinking for a Change. Have you read that one yet?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great book. I mean, that one's probably 20 years old, but it's still great stuff. So getting into the chapter, it seems like everything was based on the line that I wrote down is your future success is determined by your ability to lead others. We all, I think, are going to be successful when we involve others and we work with them to be able to contribute and for them to contribute to our success. I don't know, is that too vague?
No, I don't think so. I think that moving people in a new direction, helping them, not forcing them, but helping them to see that there are better ways to do things, better ways to achieve their goals, is where leadership really comes alive for each of us individually. And so that we help those people move to a new level.
So I'll go through some of the things that I took away from the chapter.
Okay.
One thing that he mentioned is you are not pulled, you are lifted. And I thought, wow, that's really relevant on how you end up excelling in a level and degree, however success is measured. I came up with a line many years ago. It is think selfishly, act unselfishly. And I think we always need to be able to put our mask on first before assisting others. And if we think about the areas that we are able to contribute in another person's life, if we look at education, we can't outsource education. So we need to learn things to be able to earn an income, to be able to provide for a family. Physical fitness is something that is selfish because we are the ones that are in the gym working out, making sure our body is in great shape. Eating is also selfish because we need to take care of our bodies so that we're around for others to be able to, live a life with. So there's a lot of things that we do that we have to think selfishly, but we need to act unselfishly. Always think about, how does this impact the other person?
Mm-hmm.
And be receptive to the impact that you make on other people's lives, and to be able to have some empathy and sympathy, to be able to talk with them when things are not going right, or you feel like there's a communication barrier and you're not getting the communication that you need.
Well, that acting unselfishly takes one of his 4 rules of leadership that he talks about in this chapter. It says, trade minds with the people you want to influence. And when you say that we need to act unselfishly, I think that we need to think about how what we do is influencing others. We need to think about how what we do is affecting others and how it makes them feel. And anything that we say, anything that we do does have an effect on the people around us. The old walk a mile in their moccasins, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I always say,
not a new idea.
Well, the recent one is, everybody is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. Every time you see somebody and they're distracted, or there's something, they're not paying attention while they're driving, and they're not texting, they're just, their mind is someplace else. It's, they're fighting a battle you know nothing about. So have some patience. And
I think anytime that we go through any kind of a failure or a personal challenge, we should use that to be more empathetic toward the people around us. Sometimes we go from success to success, and it can make us harden sometimes to how other people are affected by things. And if any failures that we have, if we take those and say, you know what, there's people around me that are experiencing those failures on a regular basis. I should be more understanding if they make a mistake, or if they have a challenge, they don't call me back. Whatever those things are that aggravate me, there's something going on perhaps that caused that.
And he talks about that in the book on being human. When I see a situation like that, I just need to take a time out and think about this person. This is a person, and they're having a bad day, or they're having a bad situation right now. And I've seen it when I was managing a dining room at a 5-star hotel, and somebody was chewing out a server. And I walked over and I said, "Excuse me, we need to have a talk." And I pulled her away. We went into the kitchen, and then we had a little conversation. She had a little bit of a break, and then we came back and we addressed the situation and got it all resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just taking that time out with everybody before they end up doing or saying something that they're going to regret.
Before she knocks him over the head with that bottle of wine.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very uncomfortable situation, and it was just, that's just the natural way for me to approach it. I was never trained to do it like that, but that's just what came out of me at the time.
Yeah, I'm reading a book on how to deal with challenging situations, and it's a very complex book in the way that it puts ideas together, and it's very detailed and tries to use all these psychological principles. And as I was reading that, I was reading this book as well, and I hit this, what is the human way to handle this? And that pretty much is the whole book that I'm reading summarized in one sentence.
Right.
Just be nice to people. You don't have to yell at them. Just,
so
find ways to, how would you want to, the golden rule, how would you want to be treated in this situation?
Yeah. I have a good friend who's a retired 4-star general from the Air Force. Tom is his name. And he was telling me one day that he got promoted because every time that he led his troops, he never ever criticized anybody in public. Anytime he had anything critical to say, he'd always pull them aside and talk with them, and then they would change their behavior, and then they would be part of the team again. Right. And everybody in the group knew that that's the way he treated them, and everybody above Tom knew that that's the way he treated them, and that's how he got promoted to a 4-star general.
Right.
There's only 10 of them in the world from the Air Force. It's an amazing role. He led the war in Kosovo. Fascinating stories about the decisions that he had to make.
Oh, and that was a dirty, ugly war. So
right. Tom, we're thinking about sending in a B-2 bomber. They're worth $2 billion. We only have 23 of them. Are we going to get it back?
That's right. I'll talk to the pilot. That's his job.
Yeah.
Criticizing people in public, yelling at people, even treating them in a snarky way, or what we think is a clever little snide comment. It causes people to defend themselves in such a way that they will never listen to us anymore, or they will never make the change we're hoping they make, because they're going to defend the way they are. That's one of the rules in selling, right? You don't go up to a client and say, yeah, the product you're currently using sucks,
Yeah.
because then they go to defend it. But if you say,
who decided to buy that?
That's
I
right.
did.
No,
Oh,
I did.
you moron.
Yeah, that's right. And
Good
so,
luck
but
with
if you
that.
let them, if you say to them, tell me all the great things you like about the product you're currently using, they'll get around to the stuff they don't like about it. So don't get them in a defensive position, whether it's in criticizing them for a behavior or trying to persuade them or influence them to buy something that you're promoting. Now, he uses in his 4 rules of leadership, he likes to use the word think. I believe that has a lot to do with the book title. But he talks about thinking progress, believe in progress, and pushing for progress. Was that meaningful to you at all?
It was. I think there's, the difference between the brain and the mind, and the mind hopefully is the one that's thinking and not always the brain, because sometimes we do things that are really stupid when we don't use our mind.
The old reptile brain, part of our brain.
Yeah, exactly. Bad decisions.
Yep.
But I think being conscious and thinking about different situations is the only way to not necessarily be critical, but to be able to analyze it, to be able to find out if it's working or not working. And we always need to be constantly debriefing what's working or not. It's the only way we're going to improve.
Well, I think also it's hard not to get caught in the past of habits that we had that we liked, or tools that we used that we liked, and then those tools go away or new tools replace them. And 10 years ago it was the smartphone. Mm-hmm. and you really had to start wrapping yourself around a new technology and saying, okay, I'm not going to get caught behind and say, well, I'm going to keep using my flip phone because it really works for me. I talk to people that have that mentality and they just seem like old fuddy-duddies. So look for those new ideas that you can integrate and watch as the world changes, but be part of that change. Don't just sit on the sidelines and criticize it.
Yeah, I think some sales training methodologies need to have an expiration date to them, because too often companies rely on past performance to determine future results. Mm-hmm. The market changes, solutions change, how buyers buy solutions changes. And if we don't change the process and the practices, we're going to get left behind, and we're going to miss opportunities. It's going to cost us more money to get caught up.
Right. And then his final point was take time to confer with yourself. And as I read that, I thought about your admonition to us, and we spoke about it last week, and that is to sit down at the end of every day, look at what happened with your day, debrief yourself as far as what you want to do more of and what you want to do less of.
Seems like every time my grandfather got into trouble, he always talked about going to jail. And he would always say, I could really use the rest.
That's if you have too many kids. Could you arrest me, please, officer? I need a couple of weeks off.
I need the rest.
I ended my notes with the word think. Quit just going on autopilot for your life. Think about what you're doing. Think about how you're treating people. Think about what you want to achieve. Visualize that in your mind, but start to really think on those things that you want and change your own behavior.
Just one more thing that I'd like to add, Bill, and that is he brought up a chapter in the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill that talks about specialized knowledge. And if I had a chance to do it over again, and I was 13 or if I was 20 years old, if I were to pick something that I really wanted to get good at and take that specialized knowledge and really dwell and invest, I think I could have come out on the other end really concentrating on something, because now we hear the saying that the riches is in the niches, and having that specialized knowledge, I think is makes you the expert that nobody else could compare you to. I mean, you can be the trend center in anything when you have that specialized knowledge, but you have to start young, and you have to really invest time and commitment into that too.
Yeah, good advice.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by your host of Get in the Door podcast. Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Heldkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
Well, let's go into our main topic today, and that is advantage questions. Now, I know, and I talk about this a lot with my students in my sales classes, but I think that too often salespeople go into an interview with too few questions. They write down 2 or 3 things that they want to know and hope everything's going to come to them. And what they really miss when they do that is advantage-focused questions. And we'll talk about what those are and what those mean. But let's start by looking at a review of the types of questions that we might ask in an interview. And Scott, these might be either labeled different than you do, or we might have some conflict in what we do. So I'm going to go through the 5 types of questions that I use real quickly, and then we'll go into detail on them and we can challenge each other a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
The first one I talk about is the permission question, and that's simply asking permission to ask questions. I've never had anybody tell me no, but it also involves pulling out my pad of 10 questions that I've written down, and I even say, do you mind if I take some notes? And people are always gracious to do that, but it sets up a reason for doing that. The information gathering questions, those are the who, what, where, when, how. Problem-centered questions, which are, what's going on, what are the challenges that you're facing. The advantage-focused questions are the same as the problem-centered questions, but they spotlight our own advantages, right? So I'm a boutique sales trainer, so I want to focus on customized training for you versus off-the-shelf training. So I want my questions to be around focusing on them as a key customer. And then ideal situation questions are ones that are built around the future. Where I might say, if your salespeople came out of the training, what would you want them to see me do better than they're doing now? So what's your future vision? Do you have a little different titles that you put, or you have a different spin on that?
I do. I have a 5-level process, but I want to kind of go through some of the overlap between us. I love the permission questions, and I do the same thing when I meet with somebody. Is it okay if I take notes? Because I always feel like if I'm taking notes, they don't think I'm listening or that I'm deposing them, like we're getting ready for trial or something like that. So it's anything that gives me a hang up, I ask for permission.
Well, and it also gives you time to finish the note rather than, trying to keep the conversation 100% going. It's like, okay, let me finish. I want to make sure I got that down.
Yeah. So anything that I have a hang up, if I get to a conference room and I'm meeting with 4 or 5 people, I ask, where would you like me to sit? I don't want to sit in somebody's chair. If it's warm in there, do you mind if I take off my jacket? So anything that I feel.
You have a shirt on underneath it, don't you?
Well, most of the time. Usually good. T-shirt, yeah. So
with a tie.
Yeah. So anything that I have a hang up with, I ask a question. So I think that's a great step. The information gathering, I think, is very critical. I think we need to know what information do we want to know before we go into the appointment. And so often, I'm surprised how unprepared salespeople are with the information they want to know. I ask them, okay, now, what do we want to know? Well, we want to know if they're going to buy our products or not. No, it's not. It's not the question. That's not what we want to know.
They don't know that yet,
right? And so I say, here's what we want to know. So let's figure out the questions that we ask, and generally they're focused around who are the people that are involved, what process are they going to go through on making the decision, and what are the current problems that they have. Now the problems are usually a 50-50 split between us knowing the problems they have and them knowing the problems they have, and sometimes they don't even know the problems they have.
Right.
So that's what
and
we
that's
want to
sometimes
figure
that's
out.
the advantage question, right? Is to elicit that problem that they don't know they have, that our product is uniquely capable of solving.
Right, exactly. I think both of the systems that we have start intellectually and they get emotionally. We all know that people buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually, so we have to get to that impact. So the 5 levels that I have, where we start with general status, situational questions.
That's informational for me.
How many people do you have work
Right.
here? How many salespeople do you have? How long have they been here? What's their,
how many of these do you go through in a month? How many?
Yeah.
Right.
Then I get into the pain gain questions. So it's what are the current problems or what are the future problems, the latent problems that they're going to have if they don't do something now today, or what do they want to benefit in the future? So I'll say, if they could come out with a new version 2.0, what would it have to have in it that it doesn't have now?
Yep.
Now I can kind of get their imagination flowing as to what they feel like there's missing or what they would like to gain from it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I get into checked out questions, which are all related to the past. So how long has this been a problem? Who else have you talked to? Here's where you can ask, who else have you talked to about it? You cannot bring that question up after you give them a proposal because they won't answer you.
Right.
They won't answer you because
Right.
they're like, well, we're going to play one against the other. We're not going to tell who the other players are. So who else are you working with? What other options are you considering? Now we're getting everything related to the past. The past is going to determine our motivation. If this problem has happened for the last 2 weeks and now they're meeting with us, it's probably pretty urgent.
Mm-hmm.
If it's been going on for 2 years and now they're meeting with us, I got to ask, what's changed that we're meeting today and not 2 years ago?
I think that's always a
motivation.
That's always a good question. If we get stuck and it doesn't seem like it's going, we're not getting any traction on what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
Why did you agree to meet with me? Is a
Right.
good question, because
Yeah.
they didn't just agree to meet with you because they wanted to spend a half hour having
Right.
you ask some questions. So sometimes we can get lost in the interview and we're not getting any traction, and you've got to be honest and say, why are we here together?
Mhm.
If everything's going so swimmingly wonderful, I can't believe you bothered to see me.
Then you get into the fourth level of questions, which are the impact questions. So it's you want to get to the impact of the problem. What does it mean to them? Why is it important? How much does it cost you? How do you feel about that problem? That's a tough question for guys to ask. How do you feel about that?
Yep.
And it's amazing what we will get in any situation in life when we ask that question. How do you feel about that?
Or if we don't want to get into feelings, we can talk about implications.
Right. Yeah.
Right. What does that mean to your career? What does that mean to
Right.
the people you're working with? If this doesn't get solved, what's going to happen?
Yeah. How is that going to affect your performance, your
Right.
bonus, your review,
Right.
everything, promotion, etc.
Yep.
And then the last is the solution. So we're really linking the solution to the problem. So if we were to put together a program to do this, this, and this, what would that do for your business? And that's kind of your ideal situation where we're starting to paint the picture in the imagination of the application of the solution in the prospect's mind so that they can determine and define value.
Yep.
That's what they're going to be willing to pay for. So when we can define value, they're going to compare that to a price. The price will be less than the value that they receive. The value is 10 times more than the price. Now we've done it.
So what I've done then is I've really taken that pain gain question and your kind of checked out question and called it an advantage focus question, which is the same as those type of questions, but wanting to get them around. And this is what I think is missing in a lot of sales conversations. And by the way, I need to add your implication questions into mine a little bit more effectively. But the advantage focus questions really needs to build itself around what can you do uniquely different from the competition. If you don't have questions in there that will lead them to your solution uniquely, then you're probably going to get tied in on price or some kind of terms or not have a compelling reason to change because your solution isn't that much different if you can't point out to them and have them want those differences. It doesn't matter if I'm a boutique, customized trainer if they don't want customized training.
Right. Wow.
So I've got to include more complex questions that will get them around. And so let's focus a little bit on that question or that idea. What are some of the things that you've seen when you talk to sales teams about whether they really understand what their advantages are or not?
I like the question when I poll a sales team. Let's finish this sentence. I could sell more if only I could ... And then go around the room and ask them to contribute anything. And the safest answer that I always hear, well, if I had more time,
Mm-hmm.
I could sell more.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to him, okay, well, let's talk about that. What you're really telling me is that you don't know what's important. You don't know what the goal is of every time you come into the office. Every day
Well,
you
wait a
show
minute.
up
That's
for
not
work.
what I wanted to say.
Well, no, that's what
I
you're
was
saying.
trying to be
is that
positive.
I don't know how to spend my time or trade my time, and I could sell more if I traded my time better.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You could sell more if you
But
traded your time better.
But they don't see that as the issue. They say, "Oh, time is this negligible thing." And what most salespeople that I've talked to want to say is, if my boss didn't saddle me with so many detailed record things, I'd have more time. If I didn't have to fill out my status reports or my
TPS reports, TPS reports.
Yeah, TPS reports. That's right. That'd be great. Anyway. Then I'd have more time. And what I like you're turning it around on them and saying is that you just don't know how to manage your time. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, right. Well, if I could close more sales, I'd make more money. And I say, okay, well, then we get into a conversation. We don't find out we have a closing problem. We have an opening problem. And then I ask them, so tell me, what is an ideal fit? Tell me about a perfect fit. 3 attributes that define a perfect fit. They can't say it. And they can't say it because they love having a bunch of prospects that are not qualified clogging up their pipeline.
Right.
Oh, I got a full pipeline. I'm busy.
So what does that fit to you? So tell me more about that fit.
Well, give me 3 attributes. I mean, is it geographic? Is it revenue? Is it size? Is it industry? What are the 3 things that make up? Here's mine when it comes to me working with a company. An organization that sees greater opportunities in the marketplace. They feel like they have the right people on the bus, and they're willing to invest now today in those people to leverage those opportunities that are in the marketplace. If we can get those 3 things lined up, we're going to have a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good that we should be talking to those customers that fit that mold or that model that we have out there. But I find also when I talk to a lot of salespeople, they don't really know what differentiates their product from the competitors. They might have some vague idea that they're faster or cheaper or whatever. But if they were to create an advantage focused question, they wouldn't know how to do it because they really don't understand their own product's capabilities or all the other things that go around their product, their delivery, their manufacture, their sourcing, whatever those other things are that are becoming more and more important to customers, by the way. We can see with this whole coronavirus issue, I think sourcing is going to become a big part of the question. Where are you getting your products from?
Right.
People may not want to buy them all from the same source. So we need to know what those advantages are that we bring to the marketplace so we can ask questions that guide the customer to desiring those more.
And those advantages are the value proposition that your solution has. The salespeople need to be able to position their solution through the questions to play to the strengths for the prospect to identify the value proposition that you're offering and the outcome, the result of the solution that you're offering to be able to benefit them more and better than they thought of in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to add more value in the conversation every time we talk to a prospect because we need to be the resource that they turn to every time they have a question or a challenge or a problem in that specific area. They call us first. We ask all the right questions so that we're able to prescribe the solution that's going to give them a better result than they ever anticipated.
Yep.
Because they worked with us.
One of the question openers that I found to be very valuable is if there were a way. If there were a way to give you a product that did X, Y, Z, would that be important to you? Wow, I hadn't really thought about that, right? So that's a good type of question to introduce those benefits that they hadn't thought about yet.
It is. It's an imagination of the solution being applied. I like the one, what are you afraid to tell me? What are you most afraid of telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to get them really feeling, you have to have an environment where they feel vulnerable and they're willing to share the information with you. But another question is, off the record, and then you ask them a point blank question. Have you already decided on who you're going to buy from? And you're just bringing me out here to be able to work a price down or to be able to compare something to.
You get some clues that help you find that's the case? Because that's a pretty tough question.
It is a tough question. Looking at RFPs, if you look at RFPs or if you listen to the jargon and you listen to the buzzwords and you look at the RFP and you can see certain specs that are buzzwords related to an incumbent or another company, you're able to determine if they've already picked somebody.
Right.
There are certain brand words that are from different companies that you'll see and you'll hear, when I talk to somebody, a salesperson, I can generally tell where their sales training came from just by the process of the sales system that they're following and the words and the vernacular and the process they're putting me through.
Right.
I think a perfect close question would be, how do you see us working together?
Mm.
And just shut up. Don't say anything. Just drop that one off and then listen, because they're visualizing a way for you to work together. They're buying you in their mind. So don't interrupt them.
Well, that's what we're supposed to learn as salespeople, right? Is when we ask any of these questions,
right,
we let them thoroughly go through the answer, and we can't be uncomfortable with allowing them time to think. The more challenging questions that we've asked, which, as you said, are the ones as we get later into our process, right? And so people are going to think about them a little bit longer. And if we're nervous in that silence, we won't allow them to think about it fully and come up with an answer for us.
Good point.
Let's talk a little bit about our resources that we have that people can learn more about asking better questions.
Yeah, I've got a blog that I'll put on the show notes at getinthedoorpodcast.com. It's 3 questions, begin with 1 answer. It's a pretty simple read.
Okay.
So what do you have?
I've got an article, Selling Isn't Telling, which we'll have linked. And then I also have one of my 2-minute selling tips, using questions in your appointment. That's a good way to review some of this information. This segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by Steve Kloida's book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
As we close the show today, our golden nugget is a quote by Albert Einstein. The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking.
Well, I call him Al because he and I were really close, but
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect quote to end of our Magic of Thinking Big book. It's so important. Nothing happens without a goal and a dream, and that starts with a thought. That starts with the imagination. In sales, we need to increase the imagination of our clients and open up their mind to new possibilities. If we're trying to just set goals for sales, we need to think about what we want, put those down on paper, drive ourselves with our thinking. But a building or a world, as he talks about, doesn't just happen because we want it to. It starts first with a thought, and that thought is the most powerful thing in the world.
Yeah, so true.
So if you want to learn more about our podcast, go to getinthedoorpodcast.com. All the information that we talked about will be there in the show notes.
Next week, we're going to cover the forward and introduction to the book, The Challenger Sale. I think you'll really enjoy this. A forward introduction is really important because it adds context to the content. And we need to be able to know where we are, sort of the map of the mall, where are we, as we start getting into the process of the Challenger Sale. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And our topic is going to be important to who, understanding the people and the process of the sale. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great week.
Go out and do something better next week.